The protagonist of the story was a commoner mage in his previous life, and in this world, commoners are unable to use magic proficiently. Despite his considerable efforts, the male lead achieved no results, while the nobles were fortunate enough to be granted the ability to wield powerful magic. Before ending the male lead's life, a noble gave him one last chance to demonstrate his magic. When the noble saw that the male lead could only produce a small fire, he mocked him as pathetic. The noble also informed him of the teachings of the founder of magic, William Bordeaux, that those not endowed with divine lineage or talent could never make progress, no matter how hard they tried. With that, the noble created a gigantic flame that completely incinerated him. Although he was leaving this world, the male lead had to acknowledge that the noble's magic was indeed impressive, and he wished he could learn more to master such spells. Fortunately, a divine being granted this wish, and he was reincarnated as a prince named Lloyd. When Lloyd opened his eyes, he initially thought the maids around him were giants, so he immediately used fire magic to attack them, creating a huge hole in the room. Witnessing Lloyd's terrifying power, the maids could only gape in amazement, while the residents of the Salome Kingdom received news of the birth of the seventh prince. 10 years later, the Salome Kingdom had changed significantly from the past, and Lloyd had become a prince who constantly tried to avoid the maids. It turned out that Lloyd was more interested in studying magic, while they wanted him to learn hunting. Whenever he encountered someone in the palace, Lloyd always asked them to keep his location a secret from the maids. Seeing Lloyd continuously avoiding them, the attendants could only shake their heads in frustration, unable to persuade him. According to them, Lloyd was much younger than the other princes, so he had no chance of inheriting the throne. However, since birth, Lloyd had been fluent in language and able to read magical texts, leading many to believe he was the reincarnation of William Bordeaux. In reality, Lloyd's previous life was that of an ordinary citizen of the kingdom, and although he was reincarnated as the seventh prince, he retained his past memories. Now Lloyd was a prominent figure with high social status, respected by the people. However, he maintained his previous life's stance of deeply studying magic, so Lloyd was only interested in the library room filled with magical books. Whenever he went to the library, Lloyd was always extremely excited. But when the maid Silpha found him, he had no choice but to stop hiding. Soon after, Lloyd was dragged outside by Silpha for his daily sword training. Lloyd believed that if he wasn't destined to be the heir, he didn't need to learn swordsmanship. However, Silpha firmly believed that as royalty, one must be proficient in swordsmanship first. Not to mention that Silpha had been teaching Lloyd swordsmanship for 3 years, making it her life's work. Knowing he couldn't escape Silpha, Lloyd decided to train harder to return to reading books as soon as possible. Soon after, the two continued their wooden sword sparring match. During the fight, Lloyd noticed that Silpha always held back against him. On the other hand, Lloyd had a magic spell that could replicate Silpha's movements. This time, he planned to cheat by mimicking her exact moves, but Silpha's physical strength, power, and height gave her the upper hand, causing Lloyd to be continuously pushed back. To counter this, Lloyd used a growth spell to enlarge his sword and his muscles. Additionally, this spell made Lloyd float in the air, leveling their heights. With this adjustment, Lloyd managed to even the odds against Silpha, making the battle much more balanced. Next, Lloyd moved just like Silpha, and executed the same sword techniques she used. After a while, Lloyd thought Silpha had been caught up in his fighting style, so he decided to stop the copying spell and launch a surprise attack. However, Silpha blocked Lloyd's strike and then tapped him on the head for cheating. It turned out that Silpha had noticed Lloyd's tricks, such as floating in the air and enlarging his sword, and she was astonished that Lloyd could activate 2 spells simultaneously. In reality, Lloyd could use 4 spells at once, though Silpha had not discovered this yet. Immediately after the training, Silpha dragged Lloyd into the bath with the maids. There, Lloyd overheard a story about a demon sealed in a forbidden book beneath the castle. That night, Lloyd sneaked into the castle to see what was really down there. First, Lloyd used a wind-based invisibility spell to get past the guards. This invisibility worked by manipulating air currents and reflecting light, so even though Lloyd was right in front of them, no one could see him. When he heard them mention a very powerful demon, Lloyd felt incredibly excited. According to the guards, there was a powerful barrier created by 10 mages at the entrance. Yet Lloyd dismantled the barrier in just a few seconds. Although he had lived in the palace for 10 years, Lloyd was now discovering this secret study for the first time. For Lloyd, it was like paradise, a dream come true for a young mage enthusiast. As Lloyd sat down and opened a book, another book suddenly flew into the air. From the book came a lewd laugh from the demon grimoire. It thanked Lloyd for breaking the barrier on the door, and now Grimoire demanded that Lloyd break the seal on the book to release it. To thank Lloyd, the Forbidden Book demon promised to give him a lot of gold and silver. However, Lloyd knew that Grimoire had used the spell to turn stone into gold to deceive him. Therefore, this deceitful demon needed to be imprisoned forever and could not be left loose. At this moment, Grimoire, terrified, promised Lloyd that it would not do any evil. Additionally, it offered to teach Lloyd ancient magic spells he had never known before. Upon hearing this, Lloyd was overjoyed and had to confirm if it was true. Grimoire was also thrilled because it had successfully tricked Lloyd into breaking the seal. Immediately, Lloyd cast a key-shaped spell that caused the seal to explode. As soon as the demon emerged, it demonstrated an ancient magic by attacking Lloyd. The first spell was called Dark Thunder Cannon, which created a dark explosion engulfing Lloyd. The surrounding space in the room was violently distorted. Grimoire thought Lloyd had been vaporized by the attack, but Lloyd had created a spherical barrier to protect himself. Lloyd even complimented the Dark Thunder Cannon as a powerful spell and expressed his desire to learn more. Angry, Grimoire furiously hurled the Dark Thunder Cannon at Lloyd, but despite its efforts, it couldn't penetrate Lloyd's barrier. Meanwhile, Lloyd observed how the Dark Thunder Cannon was cast and learned how to replicate it. He even extended a finger outside the barrier to test the spell's damage. Seeing the rotating spell for the first time, Lloyd felt both pain and excitement. He asked Grimoire to perform its strongest version of the Dark Thunder Cannon to see what was special about it. In its frustration, Grimoire split its mouth in two to combine incantations, and then launched a spinning Dark Thunder Cannon toward Lloyd's barrier. This time, Lloyd gained new knowledge about the two-headed demon's spell combination, while Grimoire, sweating profusely, failed to break through Lloyd's barrier. Realizing that the spellcasting was merely allowing Lloyd to learn and had no effect, Grimoire felt very embarrassed and sought to escape the room. However, Lloyd created another barrier underground, trapping the demon. Lloyd explained that he used to cast spells recklessly, causing destruction, so he created strong barriers to prevent such incidents. After learning about offensive magic, Lloyd wanted to know what defensive spells Grimoire had. He then cast a spell called Inferno Fireball to roast the demon within the barrier. Thinking that Grimoire might have other interesting spells, Lloyd was disappointed to find the demon lying face down, emitting smoke. Now, even if offered money, Grimoire would not dare to challenge Lloyd again. Soon after, Lloyd restored the room to its original state, leaving Grimoire astonished. Seeing Lloyd's terrifying power, Grimoire began calling him Master. Grimoire also had to admit that Lloyd's recent fire spell was indeed very painful. Hearing this, Lloyd wanted to test if increasing his magic power would make the demon endure even more. Thinking that Lloyd wanted to destroy him, Grimoire had no choice but to kneel and surrender, vowing never to defy him again. Grimoire even trembled as he begged Lloyd to let him become his pet. Lloyd agreed immediately, but requested that the demon shrink in size to avoid attracting attention. Consequently, Grimoire transformed into a mischievous little spirit beast. Despite agreeing to be a pet, the demon still schemed to take over Lloyd's mind when he wasn't looking. However, upon witnessing Lloyd's overwhelming magical power, Grimoire quickly abandoned this idea. From then on, it wanted Lloyd to refer to it by its new name, Grimo. Lloyd had a highly skilled older brother, the second Prince Anbec, who today had dressed up neatly and was heading to Lloyd's room. While Lloyd was engrossed in studying magical books, he noticed someone approaching and quickly told Grimoire to hide to avoid detection. Anbec, having arrived near Lloyd, invited him to practice magic together. The two then went to the training area within the palace, where Prince Anbec demonstrated precise spellcasting, impressing the attendants greatly. Lloyd knew that Anbec was an exceptional prince and was rumored to be the next in line for the throne. Occasionally, Anbec invited Lloyd to practice magic for fun. Lloyd himself wasn't interested in the throne, so he got along well with Anbec. Moreover, Lloyd simply wanted the freedom to study magic. When it was Lloyd's turn, he decided to make things more challenging than before. Lloyd cast a fireball spell that could curve its trajectory, but still hit the target. Not just once, but Lloyd performed this feat multiple times with various targets. Despite Lloyd's impressive display of magical skills, the high officials did not acknowledge his talent. Lloyd ignored the trivial gossip and remained content with pursuing his passion for magic. Understanding this, Anbec bid farewell to Lloyd to rest, leaving Lloyd pleased as he could now practice his spells freely. First, Lloyd wanted to test Grimoire's dual incantation abilities from before, but Grimoire stopped him, claiming it only had one mouth. Lloyd suggested that Grimoire should fit into his hand to serve as a second mouth, which left Grimoire speechless. not expecting Lloyd to come up with such an unusual idea. Soon after, Lloyd asked Grimoire to help him cast a fireball spell. However, while Grimoire was reciting the incantation, Lloyd also murmured along. As a result, Grimoire was overwhelmed by the magical load and unable to perform the spell. It turned out Lloyd had consecutively recited 100 incantations to see if he could activate them all at once. Grimoire was furious and called Lloyd insane, saying that no one could accomplish such a feat. After some calculations, Lloyd decided to control Grimoire's mouth directly. So whatever Lloyd said, Grimoire had to repeat without objection. Lloyd then cast 2 high-level spells, 1 fire and 1 water, causing Grimoire's mouth to be exhausted. Even Lloyd was watching 2 spells combining with a large amount of magical energy in his body. Not to mention that this was a double spell, so Grimoire thought that Lloyd might flatten the entire kingdom this time. However, Lloyd ultimately launched the spell into the sky, causing the entire kingdom to be alarmed. Meanwhile, Albert's divine spirits were wondering why he was paying attention to Lloyd, so Albert had to explain everything to them. Earlier, Lloyd's spell had narrowly missed all its targets, proving that Lloyd was very skilled in magic and could potentially become a great sage in the future. Therefore, Albert wanted Lloyd's assistance when he became king. Suddenly, everyone noticed that it had become dark outside, even though it was still daytime. Grimoire was extremely panicked as Lloyd's spell had blown away the sky, turning day into night. Lloyd was also very frightened and quickly tried to restore the sky to its original state. When the sky returned to daylight, Grimoire was astonished by Lloyd's power. Although Grimoire was just Lloyd's pet, he always had to take care of Lloyd whenever he woke up. Sometimes Grimoire was quite annoyed, but he thought about eventually taking over Lloyd's body, so he endured and continued to perform his duties as a servant. Today, Grimoire read a newspaper about the huge hole in the sky caused by Lloyd. However, Lloyd was only interested in news about brave adventurers who had conquered many dungeons and brought back treasures and high-level magical items. Therefore, Lloyd decided to journey to the dungeons to explore what interesting things he could find. Lloyd knew that if he left the palace, everyone would make a fuss, so he took out a seed and cast a wood-type spell. The seed grew into a perfect replica of Lloyd in appearance. Now Lloyd had to figure out how to escape from the maid Sympha, as she would notice even the slightest change in his height. After some calculation, Lloyd immediately set out to leave the palace with Grimo. Meanwhile, the puppet Lloyd had created was impersonating him to prevent suspicion from the servants. In reality, Lloyd had separated Grimoire's soul and placed it into the puppet. Grimoire's physical body had nestled into Lloyd's palm, becoming a second mouth for him. This way, Lloyd could communicate with Grimoire at home to keep track of the situation. At this moment, the maids were very pleased to see Lloyd taking care of his appearance. Grimoire suddenly remembered that Lloyd was not at home, so he could cause chaos throughout the palace without anyone stopping him. However, upon hearing Lloyd call Grimoire a kind magical beast, he felt embarrassed and abandoned that idea. Lloyd had been away from the palace for a while and had not yet found a dungeon. He suddenly noticed below a group of monsters chasing after a girl. Lloyd thought that the girl would be killed by the monsters, but she suddenly turned around and fought them. With just one punch, she directly defeated the first monster. The next monsters only needed one kick to knock out their headlights, and for the last one, she used a very powerful skill that completely disfigured it. Observing from afar, Lloyd realized that the girl was a martial artist. He had read about martial artists in books before, and knew that they used a type of energy called Qi. Whenever they used their skills, Qi would be released and cause significant damage. Lloyd was eager to learn from her, but as a prince, he could not reveal his identity. The girl soon noticed that Lloyd was hiding in the mountains. Thinking that Lloyd might have bad intentions, she rushed forward to confront him. But when she saw Lloyd's new appearance, she was so captivated by his handsome appearance that she was stunned. It turned out that Lloyd had used magic to combine his appearance with Albert's to create a completely new appearance. Lloyd initially introduced himself as a novice adventurer, while the girl introduced herself as a B-rank adventurer named Tao. Because Lloyd was so handsome, Tao was extremely amazed and couldn't take her eyes off him. Tao had been lonely for 18 years because men didn't like strong women like her. So this time, Tao was determined to make Lloyd her lover. When Lloyd suggested exploring the dungeon together, Tao immediately agreed. As soon as they entered the dungeon, Tao demonstrated his skills by punching through all the monsters to show Lloyd what he was capable of. However, Lloyd was only interested in the glowing stones, leaving Tao speechless. After a while of chatting, Lloyd learned that Tao had no companions and was curious about her Qi-based attacks. Seeing Lloyd's interest in her power, Tao decided to explain everything to him, including how to sense Qi and practice Qi techniques as a martial artist. Tao even joked that Lloyd should absorb her chi through his mouth to sense it better, but Lloyd practiced chi techniques the way Tao taught him. When Tao saw Lloyd looking uncomfortable, she became worried, as being unfamiliar with chi could cause lung pain for the practitioner. After some practice, Lloyd successfully activated chi in his body and was very excited, believing that this power could be used to enhance his magic. Seeing Lloyd's enthusiasm for chi, Tao promised to teach him more, and Lloyd happily agreed, making Tao unable to hide his joy. Meanwhile, Grimoire was still enjoying the royal life while pretending to be Lloyd, but soon Silpha came to invite the prince to practice swordplay. When he saw Silpha, Grimoire thought, "This is bad." Tao cleared the last monsters in the dungeon to get the reward chest, but thought that this low-level dungeon would not yield anything valuable. However, Lloyd was very happy, as this was the first time he had seen a dungeon chest. Seeing Lloyd so proficient with chi, Tao was very happy. She even wanted to go home and tell her father to prepare for the wedding, but first, she had to open the chest with Lloyd. At that moment, a blade suddenly shot out from the chest, so Lloyd had to grab Tao to protect her. From under the chest appeared a lich monster, a skeleton, and Lloyd realized that this was the final boss of the dungeon. Tao was clearly frightened when she saw Lich, but she tried to act calm and told Lloyd not to worry. Instead, Tao used a strong force to push Lloyd towards the dungeon exit, helping him escape. Immediately after, Lich started creating glass shards to attack Tao, forcing her to continuously dodge. It took a lot of her strength to destroy one of Lich's glass shards. It turned out that Lich was for our rank adventurers and above, and it was surprising that it appeared in such a low-level dungeon. So I had to buy time for Lloyd to escape the dungeon. At that time, Lloyd was flying in the air after being hit by Tao's chi attack. Wanting to go back and learn more from Tao, he created a protective barrier around himself, causing two curious monsters nearby to be hit. Lloyd noticed that Grimoire had been silent for a while, actually struggling at home, and desperately called out to Lloyd. Inside the dungeon, Tao was about to collapse from exhaustion before Lich, and just as she was about to escape, Lich suddenly spoke. It mentioned that Tao's chi techniques were too weak compared to magic. Lich had previously devoured many sages who ventured into this dungeon. However, Tao was not worthy of being its prey, while Lloyd had avoided its fatal attack before. Tao then informed Lich of Lloyd's true nature, saying that in her homeland, chi techniques could not be compared to magic. However, Lloyd praised the chi techniques, which pleased Tao. Thus, she used her chi techniques to smash the Lich to pieces. Tao unleashed every attack she had practiced for a long time to destroy the Lich's barrier, telling the Lich that she had practiced so much that she had no time to find a boyfriend. Finally, Tao performed a technique called Heart-Shattering Bullet to break the Lich's protective barrier, but after using this technique, she was too exhausted to stand. The Lich saw Tao as a pitiful creature that had to use all of her chi to break its barrier, showing that all her training was in vain. With that, it launched an attack to finish Tao off. However, Lloyd arrived in time and used a protective barrier to shield Tao, which surprised her. Now Lloyd was going to punish the Lich for mocking her efforts. Seeing the Lich start to chant a spell, Lloyd immediately used chi to circle behind it, and his terrifying speed left the Lich confused about what just happened. Meanwhile, Lloyd continued to take deep breaths to prepare for his next attack, but he wondered if he could combine chi with magical power. Lloyd realized that this was indeed possible, since Tao had mentioned that focusing on breathing would help it work. He took a deep breath to fill his lungs with as much air as possible, to the point where there was no air left in the barrier. Outside, Lich continued to attack, trying to break Lloyd's barrier. Since Lloyd needed more air, he decided to break his own barrier to speed things up. As soon as Lich saw Lloyd outside the barrier, it frantically launched attacks at him. Tao, below, was very worried that she might be attacked by Lich. However, Lloyd used chi to move at an incredible speed, making it impossible for Lich to hit him. After absorbing enough air, Lloyd mixed it with the magical power in his body. At the same time, Lloyd needed some time to create a completely new technique. He then used it to cut through all of Lich's attacks. Lloyd continuously improved his technique to make it thinner and faster, even being able to attack Lich without chanting a spell. After a series of exchanges, Lich realized that chi was stronger than its own magic. With such fast attacks, Lich could no longer defend himself. Tao, watching from below, eagerly anticipated Lloyd's performance. Lloyd then delivered a decisive blow that cut Lich and its barrier in half, and he returned to Tao with a victorious smile. When they opened the treasure chest together, they found a blunt dagger inside. However, Lloyd believed that the dagger might contain some mysterious magic and asked Tao to let him have it. After defeating the final boss, the dungeon began to collapse. Lloyd thought that the chest had absorbed a lot of treasure, so he tried to take it with him. While Tao was scared and confused, Lloyd lifted the lid of the chest in time. After that, the dungeon was completely burned down, leaving no trace. Lloyd realized that the chest would store energy underground until it became a new dungeon again. I wondered if Lloyd would use Chi to defeat Lich because of the humiliation she suffered, but Lloyd just said that Chai was interesting. Soon after, Lloyd said goodbye to Tao and flew back to the palace. Before parting, Tao promised that she would train hard to become a girl who could impress him. However, I forgot to ask for Lloyd's contact information. When he returned to the palace, Lloyd found that his beloved grimoire was exhausted. It turned out that Silpha had taken grimoire to practice swordsmanship, but this poor kid didn't know anything about swordsmanship. Silpha, thinking the prince had fallen out of practice, was teaching grimoire very strictly. Now, Grimoire was crying and lamenting that Lloyd had returned home too late. While in the dungeon, Lloyd had collected many glowing stones and the chest lid, but they turned out to be useless. Only the dull dagger seemed potentially useful, so Lloyd decided to investigate it further. First, Lloyd soaked the dagger in hot water and smoothed its surface. He successfully extracted a substance called magical marrow liquid, which is used to enhance weapons. He then placed the extracted liquid into a test tube and shook it thoroughly. Lloyd understood that this liquid was very precious and could not be wasted, so he carefully used water magic to separate it. The result shows that the formula for the magical marrow was silver oil and magical powder. Lloyd could easily obtain silver and oil, while he planned to make the magical powder from the dungeon chest lid. Thus began Lloyd's process of preparing the weapon enhancement liquid. A while later, he went to see the king to request a bag of silver. Although the king could have given him a bag of gold, Lloyd only needed silver. The king was pleased to see such a young prince being frugal, but he didn't realize that Lloyd was going to melt the entire bag of silver in a pot. Next, Lloyd went to Silpha to practice swordsmanship with her. Silpha had promised that if Lloyd could win even a single move, she would give him a jar of oil. Despite Lloyd using both magic and sword techniques, he could not keep up with Silpha's movements and was defeated without landing a single hit. However, Silpha still gave Lloyd a jar of oil because she was very happy today. It turned out that Silpha had thought Lloyd had lost his edge recently, but seeing his progress made her extremely pleased. She believed that Lloyd, at only 10 years old, could combine swordsmanship and magic and would eventually become the commander of the kingdom's knights. But Lloyd didn't have time for compliments, so he bid farewell to Silpha and went to continue his work. With all the ingredients gathered, he and Grimoire put everything into the pot and successfully created the enhancement liquid. Afterward, he visited Albert to request a large number of weapons for testing. Lloyd knew that Albert had many royal guards. The guards thought Lloyd was taking the weapons to play with, but under the Prince Albert's orders, they obediently handed over the weapons. Since these were newly issued swords, everyone was worried that Lloyd might damage them. Grimoire, overhearing them bad-mouthing Lloyd, was quite upset and decided to help Lloyd create a pile of enhanced weapons to show them. Using the prepared magical marrow liquid, Lloyd fervently engraved it onto the swords. He even added some spells, causing the first sword to shatter under the strain. Grimoire believed that failure is the mother of success, so both he and Lloyd continued experimenting with the remaining swords. Despite numerous failures, Lloyd successfully created a large number of enhanced swords. Out of the initial 120 swords, only 50 were left after the experiments. Actually, Lloyd had successfully enhanced 80 swords, but he had added too much of the potion, leading to the failures. Albert noticed that Lloyd's talent had far surpassed many of the kingdom's mages, even exceeding his own expectations. However, the royal guards still thought that Lloyd was merely boasting and wouldn't succeed. But when Lord Tacha sheathed his sword and the scabbard was sliced in half, Grimoire was very satisfied. Lloyd had enhanced Prince Albert's sword very carefully and hoped to see its effectiveness in actual combat. So Albert invited Lloyd to hunt beasts in the forest to test it out. Early the next morning, while the dogs had not yet woken up and the newspaper vendor had just set up his stall, Lloyd's team set out to hunt monsters. This time, not only Prince Albert, but also Silpha accompanied Lloyd outside the city. While the townspeople were busy harvesting their crops, Lloyd's team headed towards the forest, a domain of many fierce monsters. Although the forest was quite dangerous, Lloyd felt very excited since it was his first time there, and he was eager to see how strong the enhanced swords were. Prince Albert noticed that Silpha was always closely following Lloyd, so he teased her, wondering if she had special feelings for Lloyd. Suddenly, Silpha drew her sword, startling the prince, but she had actually detected a pack of kobold wolves nearby. Lloyd had also noticed the wolves as soon as they entered the forest, but he pretended to be oblivious. It turned out that Tao had previously taught Lloyd how to sense qi, so he could see everything around him. Thanks to the enhanced swords, every monster was sliced in half. They were so sharp that they could cut through steel, and the soldiers felt like they were using swords for the first time. Albert was very proud of Lloyd for having such an outstanding younger brother. Although Silpha's sword had not been enhanced, she managed to defeat a mountain of monsters. When a monster charged at Lloyd, Tao unexpectedly appeared and kicked its head off. Seeing Tao, Lloyd pretended not to recognize her, but Tao approached Lloyd, feeling that his face was very familiar. Moreover, since Lloyd was using qi, he feared that his identity might be exposed. Seeing someone getting close to the prince, Silpha became extremely jealous and almost clashed with Tao. Fortunately, Prince Albert intervened in time to stop them. That night, the group set up camp by the lake in the forest. When Prince Albert introduced himself to Tao, she was extremely delighted. At this moment, Tao realized that Albert had a face very similar to the person who had been with her before, and that person's qi was very similar to Lloyd's. Afraid of being discovered, Lloyd tried to avoid her. When he was about to enter the tent to sleep, he saw Silpha already inside. It turned out that Silpha insisted on sleeping with Lloyd to protect him. Meanwhile, Tao was monitoring Lloyd's qi and was almost hit by Silpha's flying knife, leading to a heated argument between the two women. Taking advantage of the chaos, Lloyd quickly went to Prince Albert and bragged about the situation. Albert agreed that Lloyd was quite lucky to have two women fighting for him. Even Grimoire agreed that Lloyd was very attractive to the women around him, but Prince Albert warned Lloyd to be careful because jealous women could be very scary. Indeed, the two women's anger turned violent, knocking down all the guards. Tao said that she was assigned to repair the temple that day, and Silpha quickly ordered her to leave to settle the debt. However, Albert wanted Tao to stay because she could detect the surrounding qi. Just then, a giant wolf named Wolf Bear appeared, rendering any guard work useless. The wolf jumped right in front of the guards, causing them to panic, while Silpha ordered Lloyd to hide so she could deal with the wolf. While everyone was busy fighting the wolf, Grimoire noticed something strange about the ruined temple in the distance. Tao unleashed a powerful qi attack that sent the wolf flying a few meters, but it was still not enough to defeat it, so Prince Albert stepped in to help. Albert used the enhanced sword to increase his magic power, then launched a fireball spell at the wolf, impressing everyone. After being hit by this magic, the wolf was completely roasted. Albert thanked Lloyd for the enhanced sword, which greatly increased his magical power. At this moment, Grimoire remembered that the ruined temple in the distance was sealing a demonic entity. The wolf, which had seemingly been defeated, was revived by a dark magical force. It even summoned more allies, much to everyone's surprise. From the wolf's mouth emerged a demon named Pazuzu, who claimed that humans had once harmed his family. Pazuzu then ordered the monsters to exterminate all the humans present. Although Albert and Tao fought tirelessly, the monsters quickly recovered, leading Albert to believe that the healing power must have come from the demon Pazuzu. Grimoire, who is familiar with Pazuzu, knows that the demon can change the nature of magic to control the wolf-like creatures, making them believe that Pazuzu is their mother. Therefore, if Pazuzu is not defeated, the situation could become very dangerous. But Lloyd was more interested in having Grimoire teach him how to alter spell properties, rather than engaging in battle. Meanwhile, Tao was very frustrated because Silpha was just standing by and not helping. Pazuzu, on the other hand, laughed maniacally, considering humans to be weak and inferior. He even mocked Silpha and Lloyd, suggesting they were so scared they might just soil themselves. Silpha, enraged by the demon's words, asked Lloyd for permission to teach the demon a lesson. First, Silpha insulted Pazuzu's family, calling them a bunch of filthy, stinky trash that forced Prince Lloyd to endure their odor, which she couldn't forgive. Silpha then brandished her sword, ready to cut down any monster in her way. Pazuzu sneered at Silpha, claiming that no matter how many monsters she cut, they would be unaffected because he would continuously channel magical power to make them immortal. But Silpha mocked Pazuzu, saying that those with foul mouths shouldn't speak too much. Angered by this, Pazuzu attacked Silpha, but she used her speed to sever the wolf's limbs, leaving him bewildered. Even though Pazuzu could instantly regenerate, it caused the other monsters to move more slowly, showing that Pazuzu had to focus his magical power on the wolf he was hiding in. Albert realized this and asked Silpha to inflict as much damage as possible on Pazuzu to help regroup their forces. Meanwhile, Grimoire was busy explaining the technique of altering magical properties to Lloyd. Since this technique was quite difficult, Even Pazuzu had taken a long time to learn it. However, Lloyd mastered the technique within a few minutes and even managed to create a fragrant flower, astonishing Grimoire. While Silpha continued to beat down Pazuzu, she decided to use one of the enhanced swords, seeing how powerful it was. When she saw the sword enhanced by Lloyd, Silpha was overjoyed and nearly cried. Seeing how important Lloyd was to Silpha, Pazuzu threatened to cut Lloyd into many pieces. However, Pazuzu was actually trying to distract Silpha and suddenly lunged at her. Pazuzu thought Silpha was finished, but she was still standing, terrifying him. Silpha used another enhanced sword and sent the wolf flying into the air. Under the moonlight, Silpha switched to using twin swords and executed various techniques from her family's martial arts, starting with the 2 dragons ascending to heaven and followed by the falling phoenix. These techniques were incredibly sharp, and Pazuzu couldn't defend against them. Silpha then closed in on Pazuzu, delivering continuous strikes that knocked him out of the wolf's body. Finally, Silpha used the twin tiger's claw to make him crash to the ground. Despite Silpha's somewhat exposed fighting style, everyone had to admit that she was incredibly impressive. On the other side, Lloyd successfully replicated Silpha's stance using his technique of altering magical properties. Silpha approached Pazuzu, forcing him to lick Lloyd's sword as punishment for daring to touch him. Despite being completely overwhelmed by Silpha, Pazuzu refused to surrender. He exhaled a dark, corrupting aura, causing Silpha to worry. Meanwhile, Prince Albert and Tao had managed to subdue the remaining monsters, but they, along with the soldiers, were knocked unconscious by Pazuzu's corrupting miasma. Silpha also fell victim to the miasma, leaving her powerless. Pazuzu, infuriated by Silpha's persistent attacks, sprouted wings all over his body and delivered a powerful punch that sent Silpha crashing into the lake. Although Albert woke up, he was too weak from the foul stench to help Silpha. Despite the blow, Silpha remained undaunted, continuing to mock Pazuzu's terrible breath. Pazuzu, enraged by Silpha's defiance, prepared to finish her off. However, Tao intervened, blocking Pazuzu's kick and becoming his new opponent. Silpha, exhausted, tried to appear strong, but collapsed due to the proximity to the corrupting miasma. Pazuzu, realizing Tao was still conscious, was curious about her secret. Tao managed to kick Pazuzu, but he dodged swiftly and grabbed her leg. He then discovered that Tao had adjusted her breathing to counteract the miasma. Seeing Pazuzu's disgusting grin, Tao responded with a punch to his face and used a technique called Thunderclap Strike to knock him into the lake. Tao tried to use this chance to readjust her breathing, but a monster controlled by Pazuzu grabbed her. Pazuzu, flaunting his lineage of handsome demons, tried to seduce Tao into joining him and then used his corrupting miasma to control her, letting the monster swallow her. With all his adversaries dealt with, Pazuzu boasted about how he killed the Lang Hung's parents and used his miasma to control them, confirming Lloyd's belief that Pazuzu was a truly wicked being. Hearing Lloyd's voice, Pazuzu was startled to find someone still unaffected by the miasma, especially with a seemingly foolish demon accompanying him. Grimoire, offended by the insult, was ready to offer some advice but realized Pazuzu was beyond redemption. Pazuzu commanded the Lang Hung to attack Lloyd, who saw this as an opportunity to test his new technique of altering magical properties. He created a garden of flowers, making the Lang Hung believe they were seeing their parents. Soon, the Lang Hung were completely enchanted by Lloyd's magic, much to Pazuzu's shock. Lloyd then instructed the Lang Hung to release Tao from the monster's stomach. Pazuzu released more of his miasma to continue controlling the Lang Hung, but the pack of beasts, enraged by the death of their parents, turned on him. Lloyd watched this unfold with admiration, noting the effectiveness of the monster's coordinated attack. However, Pazuzu quickly lost his temper as he was repeatedly mauled, and he lashed out mercilessly at the Lang Hung, causing even more devastation. He then taunted Lloyd, claiming that the boy's magic was useless against a demon like him. This remark made Lloyd recall Grimo's earlier comments and prompted him to demonstrate his true strength. Grimo had always wondered why its magic had no effect on Lloyd, and now Pazuzu was about to experience why. Lloyd began setting up numerous barriers to trap Pazuzu, who, realizing the danger, tried to flee. Yet, he couldn't escape the speed of Lloyd's spells and the barriers that surrounded him. Lloyd explained to Grimo that he could cast up to 20 spells simultaneously, and that with Grimo's support, he could exceed that limit. As Grimo entered Lloyd's hand, it enhanced his casting ability. Despite Pazuzu's attempts to evade by diving underwater and moving like a superhuman, he couldn't escape the relentless barriers. Finally, Pazuzu was confined within a massive multidimensional barrier. Realizing his escape was impossible, Lloyd began listing Pazuzu's crimes, from killing the Langhound's parents to using monsters as test subjects for his power. Determined, Lloyd decided to use Pazuzu as a subject for his advanced magic tests. Pazuzu begged for the chance to negotiate, but Lloyd remained unmoved and continued his barrage of spells. He unleashed hundreds of spells from various elements, causing Grimo to faint from exhaustion. The spells were repeated continuously for 30 minutes, creating a kaleidoscope of magical effects and the anguished cries of Pazuzu. When everything fell silent, Lloyd asked Pazuzu if he was still alive. To Lloyd's disappointment, Pazuzu was already gone within just 5 minutes. Lloyd then retracted the barrier, allowing Pazuzu to make any final statements, though it seemed that his final words were now irrelevant. However, Lloyd, seeing that everyone had woken up, quickly bragged about the events that had occurred, leaving only Grimo to chat with Pazuzu. Grimo mentioned that it was currently living happily with Lloyd and was still gathering power every day to one day seek revenge on Lloyd. Pazuzu then transferred all of his remaining magical power to Grimo to help it fulfill its wish. But Grimo realized that with this little power, revenge was still a long way off. Meanwhile, Lloyd was trying to explain to everyone that a mage named Robert had defeated the demon. Luckily, they believed him wholeheartedly, so Lloyd managed to keep today's events a secret. Upon returning to the capital, the citizens gathered in the streets to congratulate Prince Albert for defeating the monsters. However, they showed disdain for Lloyd, prompting Silpha to give them a scolding look that silenced them immediately. Upon arriving at the palace, the king congratulated Albert on his successful monster extermination and demon defeat. He then inquired about the whereabouts of the two adventurers, Tao and Robert. It turned out that Tao, believing Robert was real, had set off to track him down. Albert argued that Lloyd was the one who had contributed the most on this trip, as it was thanks to Lloyd's enchanted weapons that they had avoided danger from the monster horde. Albert requested that Lloyd be added to the list of potential heirs to the throne. Moreover, Lloyd was a modest person who was not arrogant, making him a suitable candidate for king. The king warned Albert that this decision would create an additional rival, but Albert felt that as long as the country was in a better state, he was fine with not becoming king himself. The king agreed with Albert and allowed Lloyd to compete for the throne. However, Lloyd stood up and flatly declined the offer, stating that he had no interest in being king. Lloyd had only ever enjoyed playing and studying magic since birth. From now on, Lloyd would have a new companion, the Langhound from yesterday, which had apparently taken a liking to him and followed him out of the forest. Lloyd, impressed by the fluffy coat of the new pet, exclaimed how nice it was to pet. Grimo, seeing this, also puffed up its fur in a show of camaraderie. Just then, Silpha arrived, prompting Lloyd to hide Grimo in the Langhound's fur. Lloyd then introduced the new pet as Ciro, named for its pure white fur. Lloyd wanted to teach Ciro many things, so Silpha invited Lloyd to visit a place called Ali's garden, although Lloyd was not very enthusiastic about going there. They arrived at a garden full of various animals, and Grimoire wondered who Ali was to be so skilled. Lloyd explained that Ali was his elder sister and the sixth princess of the kingdom. She loved animals so much that she even kept monsters. And just then, Ali rushed over to Lloyd and hugged him after not seeing him for a long time. She even kissed Lloyd on the cheek, causing him to faint, which annoyed her maid, Eris, as the princess was always so affectionate with Lloyd whenever they met. Ali remarked that Lloyd's pet Ciro was very cute, while Silpha thought that this princess probably didn't understand much about magic and might not know how to communicate with monsters. But Lloyd trusted Ali's abilities and wanted to see her pet. Ali mentioned that it had been behind them the whole time. The monster, named Liru, resembled a horse and was a higher-level type of Langhound. Lloyd was surprised to find that he couldn't sense it with his magical senses. Liru had even stealthily stolen Silpha's headband without her noticing. It turned out that Ali had previously instructed Liru to perform such actions, but she had given the commands without any gestures, which intrigued Lloyd. He asked Ali to share some tips on training Ciro. Ali claimed that the secret was love, leaving everyone speechless. She continued to babble that with love, any monster could understand its owner. When Ali spoke, the entire garden's monsters gathered around her. However, Ali was quite annoyed when Eris mentioned that one day, Ali might become monster food. Lloyd also believed that with enough love, he could train his pet. Seeing Lloyd's interest in love, Silpha fantasized about one day offering her love to the prince. After observing, Lloyd realized that Ali communicated with animals through telepathy by channeling her magical power. Instead of issuing commands, she could simply imagine them in her mind to communicate with the animals. Soon after, Lloyd used telepathy to connect with Shiro and signaled it. Indeed, Shiro ran around the yard 3 times and barked exactly as Lloyd had imagined. Seeing Lloyd successfully train his pet, Eris exclaimed that he was a telepathy genius. However, the princess insisted it was all about his love for animals. Lloyd admitted that empathy was key to successfully training them, which made Ali very happy as Lloyd understood her perspective. After the pet training trip, Silpha wanted to practice swordsmanship, which worried Lloyd. Even when Prince Albert needed Lloyd, Silpha was ready to compete for his attention. Lloyd chose to go with Albert because he wasn't interested in sword training. It turned out that the 4th prince, Diane, needed to question Lloyd about enchanting swords, which was why he sought him out. While the pet was practicing swimming, Diane asked Lloyd about enchanting techniques. Doubting Lloyd's abilities, Diane demanded that Lloyd prove himself. According to Albert, Diane had studied blacksmithing abroad since he was young, which made him very interested in the magic that enhanced weapons. In front of the 2 brothers, Lloyd used marrow reinforcement as ink and meticulously inscribed it onto a sword. Despite Lloyd's careful and precise work, Diane observed and still thought Lloyd was just a kid pretending to be skilled. However, when Diane saw the sword, he was speechless, not knowing what kind of technique Lloyd had used. The sword was not only lighter, but also stronger, making Diane proud and confident that they would create the strongest sword in the world. Diane planned to enchant the sword directly during the forging process. He believed that combining an excellent blacksmith with a talented mage would surely produce the ultimate enchanted sword. Diane dreamed that one day all soldiers would have enchanted swords. Lloyd found this idea fascinating and agreed to work with Diane. From then on, Lloyd was always present at the forge, working on swords with Diane. Diane eagerly anticipated the day he could wield a sword that could shoot fire. After some time crafting, Lloyd was ready to apply the marrow inscription onto the molten steel, but because he infused too much magic into the inscription, the steel shattered. Outside, Silpha and Shiro were diligently observing Lloyd, so Diane invited them into the forge to help out. Feeling frustrated by the constant failures, Lloyd was encouraged by Diane, who assured him that with effort, success was just around the corner. However, Diane revealed that he had bought the marrow from outside at a very cheap price, so Lloyd had to use water magic to filter the marrow. Indeed, the red magic powder was an important material that was missing, and Diane couldn't obtain it since he had never hunted monsters before. Therefore, Lloyd thought he would have to secretly go dungeon crawling to acquire the red magic powder. Silpha also suggested entering the dungeon to hunt monsters and collect materials. Lloyd hurriedly declined, fearing that it would reveal his secret escape from the palace. However, after the previous monster incident, Silpha had suggested to the king that Lloyd explore dungeons to broaden his knowledge. Consequently, Lloyd had no choice but to leave the forge and follow Silpha to the Adventurers Guild. Lloyd was very impressed upon his first visit to the guild. The receptionist, Katerina, reminded Lloyd to provide his name and address to complete the registration process. Next, Lloyd had to place his hand on a crystal orb to assess his abilities. Having experienced the crystal orb in his previous life, Lloyd feared it might explode if he touched it. Thus, he made an effort to suppress his magical power as much as possible. The results showed that all of Lloyd's stats were at the lowest level, except for his magic, which received a grade. Adventurers around them laughed at Lloyd, calling him a lowly E-rank kid. However, Katerina saw great potential in Lloyd because his magic score was very high, even comparable to the Silver Sword Princess, which made the other adventurers unhappy. The Silver Sword Princess was known for being a powerful adventurer who had conquered numerous dungeons, so the idea of an E-rank kid being on par with her seemed far-fetched to them. Silpha, unfazed by their reactions, reminded Katerina to quickly assign a task. The leader of the adventurers attempted to recruit Silpha, but she swiftly cut off his beard with her sword. Katerina then informed them that Silpha was indeed the Silver Sword Princess, which made the adventurers nervous. At that moment, Tao arrived at the guild to take on a quest. Seeing her, Silpha quickly took Lloyd home to avoid further complications. Tao shared that she had been exploring dungeons, searching for Robert without success, and now wanted to meet Prince Albert to alleviate her loneliness. Silpha, uninterested in Tao's romantic interests, demanded the return of Lloyd's cloak. After some back and forth, Silpha successfully retrieved Lloyd's cloak. Lloyd was impressed by Silpha, considering her a top-notch adventurer. However, Silpha mentioned that there were still unresolved issues, such as the situation with the Assassin's Guild. Soon after, the three of them entered the dungeon to hunt monsters. After a day, they successfully collected the necessary materials. Meanwhile, Albert visited Diane's forge to deliver an important message. A potential war or political upheaval was looming in the capital. Upon hearing this, Diane panicked and wanted to accelerate the production of the magic sword. However, Albert reassured Diane not to worry about the war. Instead, he wanted Diane to focus on becoming closer with Lloyd. Albert advised Diane to calmly study and perfect his work, as it would save many lives in the kingdom. At that moment, Lloyd's group returned with the dungeon chest, allowing them to successfully forge the first magic sword that very night. The next morning, Diane took the sword to the training ground to test it out. To everyone's astonishment, a single swing of the sword created a massive explosion, causing widespread shock. Everything in front of him was vaporized, indicating that the sword was perhaps a bit too powerful. The sword was then named after Lloyd and Diane. Lloyd, after a day of intense work on the sword, comfortably went to bed for a good night's sleep. Due to the sword's initial overwhelming power, Lloyd had to reduce the damage of the fireball spell. However, he noticed Albert seemed unusually hurried with the sword's production, raising Lloyd's curiosity about what Albert might be hiding. While everyone was fast asleep, Lloyd suddenly sensed someone sneaking into the palace. It was a mysterious girl cloaked in black. As she stealthily searched for a way into the palace, Lloyd swooped down to catch her in the act, creating a barrier to prevent her escape. After greeting her, Lloyd wanted to discuss her intentions, but the assassin revealed herself and released a paralyzing, poisonous scent. Lloyd tried to use a purification spell, but it had no effect. The assassin informed Lloyd that no one could cleanse her poison. Typically, Lloyd's purification spells could neutralize any poison he had encountered before, indicating that this poison was unique and new to him. He suspected that only cursed beings could handle such poison, and the girl admitted she had been cursed by poison since birth. She was known in the underworld as Wren the Poisonous Butterfly. With just one kick, Zen shattered Lloyd's barrier, leaving him quite impressed. Before leaving, Wren told Lloyd not to worry, as he had only inhaled a small amount of her poison. While it was not life-threatening, it would cause significant pain for the next few days. Lloyd was unconcerned, as he switched to using key techniques to continuously heal the poison. Though Lloyd could have captured Wren, he chose to let her go, intending to follow her back to the Assassin's Guild's hideout. Earlier, Silpha had informed Lloyd about the 6 wanted members of the Assassin's Guild, who were very skilled at concealing their presence. Each member possessed unique powers, piquing Lloyd's interest in meeting them. Although Wren was adept at hiding her presence, Lloyd was still able to track her every move. Lloyd quickly set off to follow Zen back to the Assassin's Guild's base, but Silpha woke up and tried to follow Lloyd, though she was too late. Meanwhile, the 6 members of the Assassin's Guild were listening to Zen's report. She informed them that the palace was mass-producing magic swords and suggested that the group act swiftly. However, a man named Gali reminded Zen that they no longer had a leader and shouldn't act as if they did. The discussion was cut short when they realized Lloyd was present. Knowing he had been discovered, Lloyd jumped down to confront them. Zen was incredulous that Lloyd was still conscious after inhaling her poison. Since the base had been compromised, the group was determined not to let Lloyd escape. However, Lloyd wasn't intimidated and dispelled the barrier, ready to face them. Lloyd first adopted the Baixia fist stance similar to Tao's. When Babylon, a member of the group, charged at him, Lloyd found himself constantly on the defensive due to Babylon's rapid movements. Babylon's flexibility and surprise attacks made him a challenging opponent. Babylon revealed that he too was cursed, which granted him his remarkable physical abilities. Before Lloyd could respond, a member named Crow appeared behind him, casting a spell that made Lloyd's body feel heavy. But Lloyd used a strength enhancement spell to evade a powerful punch from Gali. However, Gali had a curse that bound Lloyd to him with threads. Finding himself stuck, Lloyd discarded his clothes to escape. Taria, another member, then closed in on Lloyd, attacking him with a sword. Taria's curse allowed her to transfer wounds from herself to Lloyd, but Lloyd wasn't in pain and was actually intrigued by her abilities. With the introductions complete, Taria thought Lloyd must be frightened by now. However, Lloyd remained unshaken and healed himself instantly. He then conjured 2 swords and began mimicking Silpha's techniques. The sight of Silpha's moves unsettled the assassins, as she had previously left a lasting impression on them. When Lloyd charged, the assassins quickly scattered to avoid him. The first to face Lloyd was Babylon, who got beaten severely. Fortunately, Babylon's elastic body reduced the damage from Lloyd's blows. While Lloyd was occupied, Crow attempted to cast a spell on him, but it hit Gali instead, causing Gali to vanish. Lloyd then used Silpha's sword techniques to deal with the next opponent, Crow, starting with the dual dragons ascend and finishing with the soaring swallow descent. As Lloyd faced the remaining assassins, he was a bit concerned for Crow, who seemed to be in significant pain from the previous attack. After dealing with Crow, Lloyd turned his attention to Taria. Despite knowing that Taria could share damage with him, Lloyd did not hesitate to inflict more harm. Eventually, Lloyd unleashed the Baixia fist, sending Gali crashing into a wall. Now, only Ren remained, visibly trembling after witnessing Lloyd's power. Lloyd invited Ren to demonstrate more of her poison, but Gali intervened urgently, warning that Ren's poison was uncontrollable and would affect everyone present if released. Realizing that the group's curses were beyond their control, Lloyd decided to assist them. He dodged Gali's embrace and struck him from behind with a powerful blow. Seeing this, Ren became furious and attacked Lloyd, but Gali stopped her, revealing that he was no longer injured. Thanks to Lloyd's spell, Gali had managed to gain control over his curse and stop the threads from spreading uncontrollably. Lloyd had used a spell to help regulate the magical energy in Gali's body. Despite this being Lloyd's first attempt, he was pleased with the success. Since his clothes were now quite dirty, Lloyd discarded them. Lloyd proceeded to help the rest of the assassins manage their curses. With Lloyd's assistance, they could now control their powers effectively. Crow was able to speak without unintentionally casting spells, Taria could manage her curse of sharing wounds, and Babylon could move normally again. Ren, though relieved, was still slightly annoyed that Lloyd had touched her earlier, though she could now wear her clothes comfortably without fear of releasing poison. Taria prepared a new set of clothes for Lloyd, and the group threw a grand feast to thank him for his help. Gali had an important matter to discuss with Lloyd. The group wanted Lloyd to lead them as their new leader. Naturally, Lloyd declined, citing his busy schedule with magical research and showing little interest in Gali's lengthy explanations. However, when Gali mentioned Jade, who had the ability to teleport, Lloyd's attention was piqued. Before Gali could elaborate further, Jade returned to the base and greeted everyone. It turned out that Jade had struggled to control his teleportation curse, leading him to inadvertently travel the world. He even brought back several souvenirs for everyone. Jade had returned with an important announcement for the group. He decided to create the Assassin's Guild's emblem in the form of coins. From now on, the group would take on covert missions that the Adventurers Guild could not handle. Each time they completed a mission, they would leave a coin at the scene to let others know that the Assassin's Guild was fighting for world peace. Hearing this, everyone agreed, as now the guild no longer had to hide. However, Jade still could not control his curse, so he was teleported away. Lloyd was very disappointed because he hadn't had the chance to witness Jade's teleportation power. Gali then informed everyone about the rebellion of Lordust. At that moment, Jade sent a letter via teleportation, prompting the group to set out immediately. When Silpha arrived at the base on her wolf, there was no one left. Only a letter on the wall stating that Lloyd had gone with the Assassin's Guild to Lordust's estate. Albert was very distressed upon reading the letter because the kingdom of Saloon and Lordust were on tense terms. He feared that the Assassin's Guild had allied with Lordust to capture Lloyd as a hostage, and Silpha even found evidence of Lloyd's clothes left behind at the scene. Fearing that his brother was being tortured, Albert and Silpha were furious and decided to rescue him immediately. Previously, Jade had sent a letter via teleportation. First, he apologized for not contacting them for a long time. He then explained that the ruling powers of Lordust were preparing for war, but he had defeated them and become the new lord. He wanted to invite everyone to a banquet. Although everyone was pleased, Lloyd felt something was off and noticed it from the guild's emblem on the letter. After receiving the news from Jade, the Assassin's Guild members wanted to go to Lordust immediately. Ren asked Lloyd to accompany them to resolve Jade's curse. Lloyd pointed out the suspicious detail in the letter. It had suddenly appeared on the table, indicating it was teleported with high precision. Teleportation was a very difficult spell to explain, and if Jade was using it so accurately, he might have mastered teleportation. Everyone agreed and was excited. Lloyd also agreed to accompany them to witness Jade's teleportation ability firsthand. Ren felt uneasy, so Lloyd reassured her that he would handle everything, and seeing Lloyd's kindness, Ren developed feelings for him. Soon after, Lloyd transported everyone to Lordust at an incredible speed. They quickly arrived in Lordust's territory to meet Jade. Despite the short flight, everyone was nauseous from the wind. While everyone rested, Ren decided to go into the forest to find something to eat. Babylon revealed that Ren grew up in the forest and was planning to show Lloyd her skills. Additionally, Ren had accidentally harmed her loved ones with her poison curse since she was a child. and had lived alone in the forest until Jade brought her to the Assassin's Guild. Seeing Ren's fierce expression made everyone worry about her, but Jade encouraged Ren, saying he would train her properly. Jade even became so obsessed with Ren's poison that he fainted from the overwhelming amount of it. However, Jade decided that Ren should live here with everyone, and the group happily divided the tasks to support and take care of her. Gally took on the educational role. Babylon was in charge of cooking, while Taria and Jade designed outfits for Ren. After some time, they completed a black outfit for Ren that could suppress her poison, allowing her to live comfortably with everyone without affecting them. Moreover, Jade gave Ren a hairpin, which made her so happy that she cried. Thus, Ren came to see Jade as her older brother, and the 6 members of the guild considered each other as an inseparable family. Hearing their story made Lloyd even more eager to meet Jade. Grima was surprised by Lloyd's interest in others. Soon after, Ren prepared a hot pot that looked like pig feed, but she insisted that the food she cooked was the best in the world. Taria reminded Ren that Lloyd, being a prince, shouldn't eat such a dish. Lloyd and Grimo enjoyed the hot pot very much, having eaten much worse in their past lives. Everyone else tried it and agreed it was quite good. Seeing the warm atmosphere around them, Ren wished that Jade were here to join them. Previously, Jade had informed the group that the Adventurers Guild was considering dropping the bounty on them, which delighted everyone as they were about to escape their life on the run. However, Jade did not seem pleased at all. He admitted that he had always lied to himself about being a wanderer. In reality, Jade was the 3rd son of the Lord of Lordost, and he had joined the group merely to exploit them. Currently, Lordost was under the tyrannical rule of Jade's family, who were preparing for war, but Jade did not want war at all. Therefore, Jade needed the strength of everyone here. Ren was surprised to learn that Jade was a wealthy young master from Lordost, but no one showed any astonishment or blame towards Jade. They all understood that everyone had their own path and purpose in life, so the group was ready to help Jade fight against his family. Jade was deeply moved by their feelings, but he decided to handle the matter himself. He believed that if the others got involved, they would be in danger and might even be hunted down, losing their freedom. Although Jade's body was cursed, he had been living happily with everyone for a long time. Now it was time for Jade to return to Lordost to end the war, and he also aspired to become the Lord of Lordost. He instructed everyone to maintain the activities of the Assassin's Guild properly and not to do anything wrong, promising that once he became the Lord, he would definitely invite everyone to live there with him. Upon hearing more about Jade, Grimoire was deeply moved and cried his eyes out, while Lloyd, having had a satisfying meal, promptly fell asleep. The others were left speechless, seeing Lloyd sleeping while still maintaining the barrier. At this point, Ren suggested leaving Lloyd to sleep there, while the rest of them went to scout the mansion. She suspected that Jade's letter might have been sent under duress, so they needed to check it out. Everyone agreed, leaving Lloyd sleeping on the grass, but Grimoire felt uneasy about the situation and decided to follow them to ensure their safety. When they arrived at the mansion, they saw a luxurious noble party and noticed that there was no sign of hostility, which made the assassins want to go inside. However, Grimoire wanted to go back and inform Lloyd of the situation first. Just then, a dwarf noticed the group and took them inside to join the party. As it was their first time attending a noble party, everyone was quite bewildered, and Grimoire intended to return to Lloyd. However, Ren stopped him, feeling nervous about meeting Jade again. Shortly after, Jade appeared and greeted the group, which made them very happy. Jade felt that noble attire didn't suit him, so he switched to commoner clothes, impressing everyone with his control over the teleportation spell. Grimoire then reminded Ren to greet Jade after such a long separation, but Ren was so emotional that she didn't know what to say, tears streaming down her face. However, the person before Ren revealed himself to be a noble and his subordinate. This noble used Crow's curse power to force everyone to kneel before him, and his curse was so powerful that no one could lift their heads. He then allowed his subordinates to devour them to absorb their curses. Seeing this, Grimoire attacked the noble to help everyone escape. Knowing how dangerous this noble was, Grimoire fought back, but the noble teleported behind him and delivered powerful kicks, sending Grimoire crashing into the area where Lloyd was sleeping. The loud noise woke Lloyd, and he saw Grimoire panicking and reporting the situation inside the mansion. Meanwhile, the others were still confused about what was happening with Jade, but they soon realized that the surroundings were filled with demonic nobles living parasitically on human bodies. The parasite inhabiting Jade introduced himself as Gisarm and claimed to come from across the ocean. Gisarm's purpose in coming here was to strip Jade of his teleportation power. Now that he had completely taken over Jade's body, he could teleport with ease. Gisarm also recounted that it took several months to erase Jade's will, and during that time, Jade had suffered greatly under his torture. When Master Ren showed anger, Gisarm kicked her, causing Jade's hairpin to fall to the ground. According to Gisarm, Jade had continuously begged him to spare his friends. Jade knew that Gisarm was targeting those with curse powers, but soon after, Gisarm devoured Jade's brain. With only a faint consciousness left, Jade decided to log out, hoping to drag Gisarm along with him. However, Gisarm used his power to restore Jade, forcing him to endure a living hell. From that point on, Jade became despondent until his mind vanished. Seeing Gisarm recounting the story with a mocking expression, everyone felt intense hatred toward him. He even used Jade's voice, further enraging them. At this moment, Gisarm smashed the hairpin Jade had given, causing Ren great distress. He then allowed his subordinates to devour the members of the Assassin's Guild, intending for them to absorb the curse powers within them. However, Gisarm noticed a magical seal on Ren's arm, and asked her who had cast it and what its effects were. Ren remained silent, unwilling to betray her friends. In this life or death moment, Ren could only remember Jade and their past memories together. Meanwhile, Gisarm continued to question Ren about the seal. At that moment, Lloyd's barrier enveloped the members of the Assassin's Guild, leaving them astonished. From above, Lloyd cast a powerful spell directly at Gisarm. Lloyd's divine attack created a massive crater inside the mansion. Afterwards, Lloyd informed Gisarm that he was the one he had been searching for. The demons were left in awe of Lloyd's power, while Ren was overjoyed that Lloyd had come to rescue her once again. After examining Ren's wounds, Lloyd healed her and urged everyone to leave quickly, as the demons were eager to consume those with curse powers. Though Ren was reluctant to leave, the group took her with them because staying would only hinder Lloyd. Gisarm's subordinates thought he had been burnt to a crisp, but were shocked to see him still alive. Upon seeing their master return, the subordinates became extremely compliant. Gisarm mentioned that the Assassin's Guild had a hiding skill even he could not locate, so he ordered his subordinates to bring them back if they wanted to avoid death. However, since Lloyd was still there, he did not allow them to proceed. Lloyd unleashed a powerful spell that forced Gisarm's subordinates to flee in panic. On this side, the Assassin's Guild was in awe of Lloyd's tremendous magical power. Lloyd was now ready to punish Gisarm for daring to harm his friends. Two of Gisarm's subordinates charged forward to attract Lloyd's attention. Gisarm then unleashed an attack that pierced through Lloyd's barrier, catching him off guard and unsure whether to block or dodge. Lloyd decided to dodge downward, causing Gisarm's subordinates to be hit by the attack. Through his magic appraisal, Lloyd realized that anyone struck by the attack would have their heart stop and die instantly. Grimoire assessed that Gisarm could generate magic power independently, much like Crow's curse, but Gisarm was far superior to Crow. Lloyd found that conventional spells could be blocked by the barrier, but direct magic like Gisarm's could easily pass through. He became intrigued by Gisarm's power, while Gisarm expressed disappointment at his subordinates' ineptitude, as they were running around aimlessly. According to Grimoire, demon ranks are classified based on their strength, with the ones running below classified as the lowest tier, rank 10. Grimoire himself was rank 3, while Gisarm was above rank 1, which means he was a ruler among the demon nobility. Gisarm's power was so formidable that even 100 rank 1 demons would be no match for him. Therefore, Grimoire advised Lloyd to keep his distance from Gisarm and not take risks. However, Lloyd was very interested in Gisarm and approached him, introducing himself as the 7th Prince. Upon hearing this, Gisarm recalled that the 7th Prince was someone Jade had greatly wanted to meet. Coincidentally, Lloyd also wanted to meet Jade, so he first needed to defeat Gisarm. Gisarm accused Lloyd of allowing the Assassin's Guild to escape, bodies that Gisarm desired. Therefore, Gisarm planned to take Lloyd's body to make up for his losses. After exchanging some banter, both decided to have a few rounds of combat to entertain each other. Meanwhile, Tao was asking Katarina for a mission that would allow him to work alongside Jade, or if not possible, then to work with Lloyd. Katarina was shocked by Tao's request, as even a child like Lloyd was someone Tao wanted to partner with. Grimoire, genuinely concerned, advised Lloyd to flee, as Gisarm possessed terrifying power. For Gisarm, human magic was like mere ripples, while he resided in the depths of the ocean where light could not reach. Gisarm demonstrated a bit of his power by bombarding Lloyd's barrier, but since the barrier seemed too thick, he created numerous spears. He then launched these spears at Lloyd, forcing him to continually dodge around the castle. Each time Lloyd's barrier was breached, he would immediately regenerate it to defend against Gisarm's relentless attacks. Gisarm continuously aimed his spears wherever Lloyd flew, making it difficult for Lloyd to evade. However, Gisarme didn't allow Lloyd to keep dodging around. He teleported directly to Lloyd and delivered a kick that deformed Lloyd's barrier. Gisarm then created a drilling spear to attack Lloyd from behind, but Lloyd managed to create a stone statue to defend himself. On the other side, the people were in awe of the high-level battle between Lloyd and Gisarm. However, Gisarme's subordinates suddenly discovered that the Assassin's Guild was nearby and immediately pursued them. Gali then reminded Babylon to climb out and open the way for the group. At this moment, Grimoire was so terrified that he was on the verge of tears from being involved in Lloyd's battle, while Gisarm informed Lloyd that he could freely use his teleportation power. Although Jade couldn't control teleportation before, demons could easily use any cursed power as long as they had a body. Gisarm advised Lloyd to give up, as he was about to claim the bodies of the Assassin's Guild members, because Lloyd could not avoid his next attack. Gisarm then teleported a spear behind Lloyd, catching him off guard and unable to evade. Gisarm even teleported multiple spears, making Lloyd look like a pincushion. Meanwhile, the demons below were frantically rushing towards the Assassin's Guild, demanding their bodies. But Gali had created a special sticky substance that prevented them from moving. Crow then cast a spell to pin them down, making them stick even more, while Babylon was doing his best to open the gate. As soon as the gate was raised, he urged everyone to quickly escape. However, when Crow and Ren were just outside, the demons were using their strength to break free from the sticky substance. Talia decided to stay behind to buy time for the group to escape. She used her ability to share wounds, causing injury to the demons' legs. Talia then instructed everyone to run towards the forest and erase their presence. But the demons quickly recovered, so Talia had to use her sword to continue damaging their legs. Although Ren wanted to stay and fight with the group, Gali pushed her out and then collapsed the gate. Gali decided to stay and help Talia, as she couldn't handle them alone. To defeat them, Gali urged Talia to use her strongest move, causing the demons to show extreme confusion. Talia was prepared to sacrifice her life to take them down all at once. As the demons charged, they were halted by Gali's sticky substance. Ren felt extremely sad when she learned that her friends had sacrificed themselves, and she was unable to stop it. They had promised to enjoy freedom together, but now all she could do was helplessly watch Talia and Gali die. Meanwhile, Gisarme mocked the assassin's futile efforts, declaring that they were doomed to fail before him. He realized that the rubble beneath him was just rubble, not Lloyd. Lloyd suddenly attacked with the Grimoire's sword, but Gisarm had dodged the attack. Gisarm was surprised to see that Lloyd had used a land decoy and was now swinging a mysterious sword. Despite the unfavorable situation, Lloyd asked Gisarm to move their battle elsewhere to avoid further complications. Just then, Prince Albert's army arrived and began to unleash hellfire on the city, burning down the demons. Silpha then breaks through the city gates, and Albert orders his men to find Lloyd, believing him to have been kidnapped. Tao, disappointed that there is no romantic partner in town, hears that Prince Albert is coming to Lordas to rescue Lloyd. She rushes there to help the handsome man. The demons cannot stand the fire and jump into the water. Ren, thinking that Albert's appearance means rescue, is relieved, but Albert and Silpha begin to interrogate the assassins, demanding to know Lloyd's whereabouts. Silpha threatens to execute one person every minute if they do not speak. Babylon has instructed Ren not to reveal that Lloyd is fighting a strong enemy, so Ren insists that Lloyd is only fighting a minor enemy. Silpha, suspecting deception, prepares to execute someone, but Albert is furious at the state of Lloyd's precious underwear. Ren then begs Silpha to believe her, explaining that Lloyd is fighting to protect the assassins, her family. Just then, a demon attacks but is stopped by Ali, who trusts Ren because her pet can detect bad intentions. The demons had now gathered, so Albert asks Silpha to rescue Lloyd. However, Ren stops Silpha, claiming that Lloyd was fighting a very weak opponent and did not need any support. At that moment, Gisarme's magic destroyed part of the bridge, preventing anyone from advancing. The demons fell into the water and were struggling to swim to shore. Above, Lloyd breathed a sigh of relief that no one could bother him anymore. Gisarme saw this and continued the battle with Lloyd. Lloyd was a little worried about the situation below, but Albert ordered his soldiers to use their enchanted swords to attack the demons, causing them to scream in flames. This allowed Lloyd to focus more on fighting Gisarme. However, the demons were not affected by the weak magic and quickly recovered. They even asked Albert to make the flames bigger, as the current flames were too small to be effective. Even Diane's fireball couldn't destroy them. Seeing the situation getting worse, Albert decided to ask Silpha for help. But when he looked around, She was nowhere to be found. It turned out that Silpha was riding Shiro and ordered him to jump into the mansion. She even made Shiro carry a rope so she could follow, but the fat dog could only jump a few meters before lying on its back on the pond. At that moment, a demon climbed onto the bridge and suddenly attacked Silpha, but she pulled out her twin swords to block the attack. Their fighting speed was so fast that no one could see clearly. The demon proudly introduced himself as a level 8 demon in the demon world. Like Silpha, he was also a skilled swordsman with the Heavenly Demon One Sword Style technique. Silpha noted that demons were ranked according to their strength and wondered if Pazuzu was ranked higher than this demon. She also wonders why he is wearing a boot on his head, which angers the demon, as it is his extremely fashionable hat. Albert's army burns the demons to no avail. Even when a demon tries to sneak attack Albert from behind, Babylon intervenes in time to save him. Albert thanks Babylon, but notes that his actions seem a bit cruel. Babylon explains that, despite being an assassin, he never takes anyone's life lightly. Those possessed by demons cannot be saved, including the leader Jade, who died at their hands. Albert thanks Babylon for the advice, and now feels brave enough to free the unfortunate people. He uses his magic sword to increase his magical power, and casts a spell that summons many hellfires into the air. As they fall, the demons are completely burned. Despite being exhausted, Albert commanded his army to use all their strength to defeat the invading demons, as this was a battle of revenge for the innocent lives they had taken. Meanwhile, Silpha, with her dual swords, was engaged in a deadly battle with the dwarf demon. Both swordsmen moved at such incredible speeds that the audience could barely keep up. The demon's techniques were based on the celestial demon's sword style, while Silpha's movements were derived from the Langlis family's swordsmanship style. As they clashed, it was like watching a dragon and a snake in the sky. Silpha switched to her wolf fang style, while her opponent countered with his great celestial ball technique. When their techniques collided, a strong gust of wind was created. After a series of sword strikes, both of them were injured on the forehead, but the demon had the ability to heal. Determined to possess Silpha's body, the demon aimed to use her Langlis style for himself. He unleashed a massive sword strike that tore Silpha's dress. He revealed that the technique he used was from the body he was inhabiting, a body that had diligently practiced swordsmanship, leaving its hands covered in scars. With this body, the demon had inherited the memories and swordsmanship skills that took years to master. However, Silpha suddenly jumped into the air and used the demon's own celestial demon sword techniques against him, leaving him with little to no defense. The demon was extremely surprised, not understanding how Silpha could use her own techniques. Silpha explained that she could learn swordsmanship techniques simply by observing her opponent's fighting style. She mocked the demon, calling him a fool who only knew how to possess others instead of learning for himself. While the demon was seething with anger, Silpha summoned Shiro. She rummaged through its fur to find something special, the Demon Slayer's sword that Lloyd had forged for her earlier. Silpha declared that those who rely on possessed bodies will never reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. She was about to show the demon the results of her relentless training. Ever since her defeat by Pazuzu, Silpha had been practicing swordsmanship on her own every day. She had experienced using swords many times, as even a slight strong swing could bend the blade. She realized that using a normal sword would not allow her to fully unleash her power in actual combat. Furthermore, demons like Pazuzu often had extremely sturdy bodies, rendering normal swords useless. However, one day, Lloyd brought Silpha a new sword. After helping Diane obtain a magical sword, Lloyd also assisted in perfecting the sword. Lloyd informed her that the sword was not enchanted, but was instead designed to be extremely durable, allowing it to withstand all of Silpha's power. So now she can deal with all the unruly demons without fearing her sword breaking. However, Lloyd warns that the physical forms controlled by the demons are very strong, so to defeat them, Silphar needs to deliver a decisive blow. Silphar felt very happy to receive such a precious sword from Lloyd, and rewarded him with a hug, pledging to follow him for life. But Diane named the sword something very amusing, leaving Silphar speechless. Silpha vowed not to disappoint Lloyd this time, and would use the sword to kill the unruly demon. However, the demon showed no fear and reminded her of the painful past, stating that demons had turned the land into a war-torn country, and its future was bleak. The Assassin Guild was furious, and Diane prepared to fight, but Silphar stopped her, knowing it would only hinder her. Silphar then took up her sword and assured him that such a future would never come to pass. She charged at her opponent and struck with such speed that he was sliced into pieces. Ultimately, her Langlis style prevailed with the final blow. After days of torture by Gisarm, Jade's hair had turned white, and his spirit was broken, resigning to his fate. Before dying, Jade warned Gisarme that he would not achieve his goal, and that someone would defeat him in the future. Curious about this person, Gisarme tried to get Jade to reveal them, but Jade remained silent, leading Gisarme to end his life by merging with him. Now in Jade's body, Gisarme saw Jade's memories of his teammates but was indifferent, valuing only Jade's teleportation ability. With this power, Gisarme and the demons planned to spread war throughout the country. After killing the demon, Silpha honored the one whose body had been taken. She knew he must have been a skilled swordsman, and everyone around mourned him, believing he was now at peace. At that moment, steam rose from the lake, startling everyone. Lloyd and Gisarme had come to fight, and the previous attack was Lloyd's Hellfire spell. Lloyd had been dodging Gisarme's demonic spears by flying around the lake, constantly strategizing to counter his attacks. Lloyd noticed the spears had many variations, but their effect was always the same. Each time a spear got close, it only destroyed a few layers of his shield before losing its potency. But Gisarme can turn ghosts into magic, using them as a source to attack Lloyd, forcing him out of the boundary. In addition, the slowest magic of the party, the image of the wolf, can turn a magic spear into a surprise attack on Lloyd. Lloyd has to constantly change positions at high speed because even a small miscalculation can cause disaster. Currently, Gisarme is still at a distance, attacking Lloyd from afar, putting Lloyd at a significant disadvantage and making him very uncomfortable. Therefore, Lloyd decides to attack. For the first time, Lloyd combines two magics together and creates a giant fire demon to launch a powerful attack towards Gisarme. However, Gisarme easily dodges the fire with his teleportation ability, causing the fire demon to retreat into the lake, causing the surrounding steam to rise. To determine Gisarme's location, Lloyd switched to Qigong sensing, but his speed was too fast for Lloyd to keep up with. Grimo kept reminding Lloyd to move or risk being stabbed by his shadow wolf, which made Lloyd unable to stay still. Suddenly, Lloyd realized that despite the steam, he was still in the middle of a fight, and the shadow wolf technique was not used. This detail helped Lloyd deduce a new strategy for the fight. Lloyd concluded that Gisarme only used the shadow wolf technique when he had a clear line of sight to the target. Therefore, the water curtain created by the steam would help Lloyd hide from Gisarme's sight. But Lloyd needed to get close enough to use his sword effectively. Lloyd approached Gisarme, creating several earth clones to confuse him and determine which clone was real. All the clones attacked Gisarme at the same time, but only one was real. Gisarme kills one of the clones, which was actually Lloyd's strategy. However, Gisarme quickly recovers from the clone's attack. At this point, Gisarme feels confident, believing that he has calculated all of Lloyd's possible attacks. He dismisses Lloyd's efforts, thinking that no matter how hard Lloyd tries, the demon race will regenerate and recover. Gisarme is startled to realize that Lloyd's clones have not disappeared, and the clone he defeated was just one of many. It turns out that Lloyd used the clones to create confusion, making it impossible to determine his true location. After a while, Gisarme speculates that Lloyd might be observing from above, but in fact, Lloyd is right behind Gisarme. Lloyd continues to randomly mix up the clones, making it difficult for Gisarme to determine his exact location. Lloyd was delighted that his plan, though simple, had created such a challenging situation for Gisarme. Despite Gisarme's quick recovery, he was now in a difficult situation, surrounded by clones and unable to tell which was the real Lloyd. So Gisarme decided to create thousands of magic spears to destroy all the clones at once. And when he saw a kid using a barrier, Gisarme immediately rushed forward because he thought it was Lloyd. But then Gisarme was disappointed when what he just finished off was just a pile of rubble. It turned out that Lloyd used the barrier to protect the clone to distract him. Now Gisarme was completely disoriented and could only attack the clone. This made him feel very excited because it had been a long time since he had encountered such a difficult opponent. At this time, Lloyd was circling behind him without using a defensive barrier, so Grimoire was very worried that Lloyd would be hit by a spear and die. Before that, Lloyd had created a very special sword called the Magic Absorption Sword, because it could absorb the opponent's magic to help Lloyd analyze his abilities. Even Grimoire didn't expect Lloyd to be able to create such a cool thing. And now Lloyd is using this sword to absorb Gisarme's Shadow Wolf. Every time he uses Shadow Wolf magic, Lloyd cuts it off and absorbs it all. After that, Lloyd uses stealth to have time to research and analyze his Shadow Wolf magic. Lloyd's recklessness makes Grimoire even more afraid. And it has to admit that Lloyd is a stupid kid who is willing to risk his life just to research magic. While Lloyd was analyzing the Shadow Wolf, he reached Jade's consciousness.
He hoped that Jade could say something because his teammates were waiting for him outside. But Lloyd kept calling out to Jade, but she didn't respond. In return, he helped Lloyd understand how to use teleportation magic and the Shadow Wolf technique. Immediately after that, Lloyd released the clone spell and appeared to face him. And when he saw Lloyd with a slight injury on his face, Grimoire said loudly that he had no chance of fighting him from the beginning.
So why did Lloyd have to fight to protect those lowly assassins? Then just by cooperating with Grimoire, both of them could rule the world. But Lloyd just sighed and said that Grimoire was a fool. Maybe demons like him were born very strong. But humans are very weak, so they need to accumulate more experience. Everyone has to try their best to achieve their dreams. Even Lloyd is dreaming of researching magic, so he doesn't have time to play with him. Grimoire heard that and immediately used the Shadow Wolf to attack Lloyd. But he punched them right after this guy used teleportation. And his punches were all qi, so whoever got hit would feel very hurt. Hearing about Qigong for the first time, Grimoire didn't know what kind of power it was. He also didn't understand how Lloyd could know his teleportation point. Lloyd was waiting to see what move he would show off next, because in fact, his moves were all borrowed from others. Gisarma thought that Lloyd was just a little lucky, and was already trying to act cool. But Lloyd immediately reminded him of Jade's words before she died, that he would definitely be defeated in the future. Gisarm was very angry and continued to use teleportation, but was hit by Lloyd's kick. But Lloyd didn't stop there. He kept attacking Gisarm relentlessly, forcing him to endure the punishment. No matter where Gisarm tried to teleport, Lloyd was always there to deliver a powerful kick to his face. Although demon bodies can regenerate, enduring such repeated blows caused Gisarm to cry out in pain. Every time he teleported, he found himself taking another kick from Lloyd. At this point, Lloyd used a double incantation to unleash an extremely powerful fire spell. Unable to dodge the attack, Gisarm was blown into a lava pit. He knew that falling into the lava would incinerate him, but as he tried to teleport, Lloyd appeared and kicked him back into the air. For a moment, Lloyd reminisced about his past lives. He wondered who had created the spell books he used, and if it was someone very kind whom he never had the chance to meet. Lloyd was eager to meet Jade and had a conversation with him, while Gisarme continued to be pummeled by Lloyd without being able to retaliate. Lloyd, no longer in a playful mood, decided to finish Gisarm off. Enraged, Gisarme used his most powerful secret technique. He explained that demons can freely manipulate the magical energy in the air, compressing it into a sphere of dark energy capable of turning everything into nothingness. Despite the effort Gisarme put into creating and throwing the sphere, Lloyd simply waved his hand, causing the sphere to vanish into nothingness, just as its name suggested. Gisarm was stunned to see his technique disappear, only to realize that Lloyd had created another dark sphere to counter his attack. Gisarme was furious, believing that no one should be able to easily nullify his technique like that. What Gisarm didn't know was that Lloyd had extensively studied spatial magic and knew that the dark sphere technique was merely to convert a certain area into nothingness. When Lloyd first learned this technique, he had used it repeatedly, even blowing away several mountains in the process. He had even created dozens of spheres and stacked them together for experimentation. Hearing this, Gisarme was left speechless, having spent considerable magical energy to develop his technique. Lloyd explained that when the spheres came into contact, they will automatically cancel each other out. At that moment, Lloyd was as surprised as Gisarm was. Gisarme, feeling humiliated, accuses Lloyd of being nothing more than a boastful insect. He couldn't believe that the pinnacle of demon techniques could be so easily nullified. Seeing Gisarm complain incessantly made Lloyd even more frustrated. Not believing in Lloyd's power, Gisarme attempted to approach him, but when he sensed Lloyd's magical energy, he was terrified. Lloyd even created a multitude of dark spheres, leaving Gisarm speechless. No matter where he tried to teleport, Lloyd would always be right there, never leaving his side. Below, the demons were obscured by the mist, so Silpha and the others took the opportunity to cut them down one by one. Ren, using her poison abilities, warned everyone to stay away from her, but Silpha suspected that Ren was merely showing off. Albert suddenly noticed that it was morning, but the sun had not appeared. Despite the clock showing 6 a.m., it was still pitch dark outside. It turned out that the surrounding space was being affected by Lloyd's spell. He had created a dark sphere and sucked Gisarm into it. Trapped inside, Gisarme struggled to escape, knowing that if he stayed in the sphere, he would not be able to recover. To save his life, Gisarm decided to abandon Jade's body, but Jade's corpse had hardened, completely trapping him. With no other options, he had to pretend to be Jade to plead for Lloyd's mercy. Gisarm even begged Jade's former teammates to do something to save him. However, Lloyd coldly created a second dark sphere, crushing Gisarm. When the two spheres collided, they annihilated each other and evaporated immediately. As the sun rose again, Jade appeared to thank Lloyd, and then gradually faded away with a smile reminiscent of the sun. Below, everyone was surprised to see the sun shining again. Ren, who saw Jade's appearance, was reminded of his past. Jade had said that the seventh prince was the strongest in the kingdom, and on the day he was born, there was a spectacular fireworks display at the royal castle. However, it was rumored that the fireworks were actually a spell from the seventh prince that caused a massive hole in the palace. Jade believed that a child with such powerful magic would surely break the group's curse. Therefore, everyone promised that if the story were true, they would serve the seventh prince for life. Now, Ren was very happy that everything Jade had said was indeed true. Unfortunately, Jade was no longer alive, so Lloyd and Grimo created a tomb for him. However, it was just a formality, as Jade's body had been completely consumed by the void. During the battle with Gisarm, Lloyd had deciphered the shadow technique. Wherever Gisarme teleported, Lloyd easily tracked him down. Thus, when Lloyd created the void sphere, Gisarme could no longer escape. Nevertheless, Lloyd had to admit that Gisarm was a very powerful demon. The shadow technique was arranged in a very neat and understandable manner, and before his death, Jade had completed this technique and its countermeasure. Jade entrusted this to Lloyd, making it his victory rather than Lloyd's. Ren, having heard Lloyd's heartfelt reflections, was deeply moved. When Lloyd was alone, Ren wanted to thank him and express her wishes, but Prince Albert arrived first to discuss matters with him. Albert revealed that he had heard the full story about Jade, but believed that the details were fabricated to keep the true extent of Lloyd's power a secret from him. Albert acknowledged Lloyd's kindness in helping the Assassin Guild, but since the guild had caused much trouble and even kidnapped Lloyd, Albert could not forgive them easily. The guild members had requested to serve Lloyd for life to atone for their actions. Albert sought Lloyd's opinion, stating that if Lloyd accepted them, he would be responsible for their actions, ensuring they did not tarnish the royal family's reputation. Lloyd agreed that Albert's points were valid and promised to speak with the guild members privately. He vowed that if they committed any more crimes, he would take full responsibility. Albert was impressed by Lloyd's integrity, but reassured him that he did not intend to make things difficult for him. Albert valued Lloyd highly and wanted him to voice any difficulties he faced, as Lloyd was his most cherished younger brother. At that moment, Tao, in a hurry, arrived thinking Lloyd was in danger, but everyone viewed her as an oddity since the party was over. Embarrassed, Tao ran off, but Silpha caught her and prevented her from running away. Lloyd recognized the potential in the Assassin Guild's magic and felt that their leader was kind-hearted, so he decided to help them. The guild members, now forgiven, were eager to repay Lloyd. A small party was organized near Jade's grave. The others felt pressure being around the kingdom's princes, but Albert encouraged them to relax and enjoy themselves. Tao immediately started trouble with Silpha, while Albert brought a bottle of wine to toast with the guild. Initially reserved, the guild members became boisterous after drinking, and Tao even hugged Jade's grave, crying over the perceived short life of a handsome prince. Albert enjoyed the lively party and wished to host one at the palace in the future. Meanwhile, a drunk Talia attempted to seduce the prince, who remained sober and declined. Talia then used her ability to share pain, making the prince drunk as well. Though they expected the prince to reveal his wild side, Albert, still upset about the previous incident involving Lloyd's underwear, sought out Gally to settle scores. After the battle, a hot spring was created at the mansion, and everyone praised its relaxing effects. When Ren asked for permission to serve Lloyd to repay him, Lloyd, who was present, immediately agreed. Ren still felt guilty because the poison in her body had affected others, so Lloyd advised her to focus on researching poisons to develop beneficial medicines. Ren was deeply moved because she had often been shunned due to her condition. With Lloyd's acceptance, she promised to do her best to meet his expectations. Life in the royal capital Solium continued relatively unchanged, but Ren became a maid in the palace and was learning how to be a true maid so she could take care of Lloyd perfectly in the future. Meanwhile, Prince Albert reported everything about Lordos to the king, omitting the fact that Lloyd had been kidnapped, which resulted in minimal questioning from the king. After everything was settled, Lloyd and Grimo returned to the library beneath the castle, which still contained many magical books Lloyd had not yet read. Lloyd visited daily to satisfy his passion for studying magic.